All right, so let's jump into this. Today we're taking a deep dive into Indo Industries.
Okay.
We've got their Q2 FY25 earnings call transcript.
Oh, nice.
That means we're talking, high-quality textiles, bed linens, pillows, all that good stuff.
That's cozy.
Yeah. So are they making their bed, or are they tossing and turning?
Well, let's see. I think what's really fascinating here is how IndoCount is kind of navigating this global landscape. It's definitely unpredictable right now.
Right, yeah.
So we're going to unpack their performance, look at those strategic acquisitions they made in the U.S., and really get into kind of the bigger trends that are happening in the industry.
Okay. So for an investor, what should they be like? What are the things to really be watching out for?
I think, first of all, we got to set the stage right. So the U.S. retail market, it's showing some signs of life, which is good.
Right.
Good for IndoCount. But those supply chain issues, they're still kind of lingering, right?
Still a problem.
Yeah. That's something to keep an eye on.
Right.
On the other hand, though, India's textile sector, that's actually seeing a real upswing.
Interesting. Yeah, the transcript did mention free trade agreements and something called the China Plus One strategy.
Yes.
What is that all about? Can you break that down for us?
Of course. So China Plus One, it basically means companies they're looking to diversify where they're making their stuff beyond China.
Okay.
Right. And India, with its skilled workers and good trade agreements, India is really becoming a winner in this shift.
Okay.
And then on top of that, you've got relatively stable cotton prices, so that really puts IndoCount in a pretty good spot.
So they're kind of riding this growth wave in India's textile market.
Yeah, it seems that way, but they're not just like sitting back and enjoying the ride. IndoCount, they're calling this their version 2.0 transformation.
So from the transcript, it sounded like they're going for diversifying their products, going more into premium brands, and then this whole like omni-channel approach.
Exactly. And it's smart. They're going after those like high growth areas, right?
Yeah.
Utility bedding, fashion bedding, even institutional sales, think like hotels and hospitals.
Right.
And get this, they're projecting that all of these moves are going to add a cool $100 million
Wow.
to their top line every year over the next 3 years.
$100 million. That's a big number.
It is.
Okay. It sounds like they're not afraid to make some changes.
Yeah.
Speaking of changes, the transcript also mentioned some pretty big acquisitions in the U.S.
Yes, they did. So IndoCount bought Fluvitex Inc. and Modern Home Textiles.
Okay.
And both of those companies are in the U.S. quilt and pillow market.
Pillows.
Yeah. Now this is where it gets kind of interesting.
Okay, I'm all ears. So what's the story with the pillows?
Well, it's not just about buying up pillow companies. It's about setting up a manufacturing base right here in the U.S.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Think about it. They're going to be making 13 million pillows and 1.5 million quilts every year right here.
Okay, so that's a lot of pillows.
It is.
But I can see how that gives them an edge, right? Like they can get products to customers faster, maybe even save on shipping costs.
Exactly. And think about it. They can also tap into that made in America appeal.
Oh, right.
That some customers, really like.
Yeah.
But of course, all of this, the acquisitions, the whole version 2.0 thing, it takes money, right? It takes investment.
So how are they paying for all this?
Well, IndoCount, they've upped their CapEx budget for FY25 to ours, 413 crores.
Okay.
And they're doing it smart. They're using a mix of what they've earned and some debt to make it all happen.
All right, so they're putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah.
But let's get to the nitty-gritty here. How did they actually do in Q2? Did they deliver?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag, honestly.
Okay.
Sales volume, that actually dipped in Q2 of FY25. But for the first half of the year, their total income, that went up 12%.
Okay.
Seems like those supply chain problems, probably had something to do with that dip.
Yeah. Makes sense with everything we talked about earlier. So a little bit of a bump, but overall still positive growth.
Yeah. And it's important to note that their EBITDA margin, that stayed pretty stable, even with all those upfront costs from the acquisitions, and building up their brand.
Right.
They did, however, revise their margin guidance down a little bit to 15% to 16%.
Okay. Sounds like they're navigating some choppy waters there, but they're staying afloat.
Yeah.
The transcript mentions some key metrics,
Right.
but I'm curious, like, what kind of growth rates are we talking about? And how are their, like, different segments doing? How's performance broken down there?
Yeah, the transcript gives us kind of a peek into that.
Okay.
We know that they're seeing growth in different areas, but the supply chain issues, they're definitely having an impact on how much they're selling.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how they handle all of that moving forward.
So kind of a wait and see situation. What about their overall outlook, though? Are they feeling optimistic even with all the challenges?
You know, they seem pretty confident in their long-term plan, especially with the US market, looking like it's recovering, but they are aware, that there's stuff going on globally, like
Right.
what's happening in the Red Sea and interest rates going up.
Why?
They know that those things could throw them off course a bit.
Okay, so a mix of confidence and caution
Yeah.
makes sense in the world today.
Right.
But I want to dig into those challenges and opportunities a little bit more. What are the real risks and potential rewards here?
Okay, let's do it. So, one thing that really jumped out from the earnings call was the impact of that Red Sea situation. They brought it up a few times actually. It's a big deal for IndoCount.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a real mess for shipping and all their logistics.
Oh, absolutely. The Red Sea, I mean, that route's like a major artery for global trade.
Right.
Any disruptions there, like with the conflict that's going on, it can cause huge delays and push up costs.
Yeah.
And that directly affects, how efficiently IndoCount can get their stuff to their customers.
Right, and that hits their bottom line, of course. But the transcript also it highlighted some pretty exciting growth opportunities, especially with them expanding in the U.S. through those acquisitions. It seems like that could really change the game for them.
Yeah, no, for sure. Having like actual factories in the US, that gives them a big advantage.
Right.
They can, react to what customers want faster, maybe even cut down on shipping expenses. And then there's that whole like made in America thing that some people, really care about.
Yeah, that's a big selling point for some. Plus, they're branching out with their products, going for like higher end stuff, the fashion bedding and those premium brands. That seems like a pretty savvy move.
It is. By moving beyond just like the basics, the plain bed linens, they're putting themselves in a market where it's not just about like the cheapest price.
Right.
It's about quality. It's about brand recognition
Yeah.
that helps them build a business that's tougher, that can handle, economic ups and downs better.
Makes sense. But acquisitions, I mean, they always come with some risks.
Of
You know,
course, yeah.
like blending those new companies in, dealing with different company cultures and actually making those hoped for synergies work, that could be pretty tough.
Oh, absolutely. Plus, all those economic question marks they mentioned, like interest rates going up and who knows what's going to happen in global politics, that could easily throw a wrench in things.
And we can't forget about like the price of cotton. It's stable now, but if that suddenly jumps up, it could really squeeze their profits.
Yeah, it's a real balancing act for them. But they seem to be, approaching it thoughtfully, investing for the long term, but also recognizing that there might be bumps along the way. One thing that struck me when I was reading through the transcript was how little they talked about their competition.
Oh yeah, now that you mention it, I noticed that too. We know this home textile market, it's crowded. It would be helpful to get a better sense of how IndoCount stacks up against, the other players.
Yeah, exactly. Like some side-by-side comparisons would be great.
Right.
Are they taking market share from others? How do their profit margins compare? Those are like key things for investors to know.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the transcript doesn't really get into that. It does talk about how, IndoCount's confident they can compete, especially because they're focusing on innovation and being vertically integrated. But still, some comparative data would have been useful.
I agree. But overall, it's clear that IndoCount's going through some major changes. They're making bold moves, betting on growth, but there are definitely challenges and risks that come along with that.
So their success, it all comes down to whether they can handle those challenges,
Yeah.
take advantage of the opportunities, and really execute their plan well. Sounds like their stories, like just getting started.
It does. So where does that leave us? What are the big takeaways for investors from this deep dive into IndoCount?
Well, what really stands out to me is that IndoCount, they're not just standing still.
Right.
They're going after growth through acquisitions, through offering different types of products, and through strategic investments. I got to give them credit for being proactive.
Yeah. But, like we've been talking about, it's not without risk. The world's a volatile place right now, and those supply chain problems, they're not going to magically disappear overnight.
Right.
Plus, making those new acquisitions work, that's going to be a big test for their management team.
And that revised margin guidance, I mean, that tells us they know about these challenges.
Yeah.
It's going to be really important for them to stay efficient and keep costs down as they get bigger.
Absolutely. They're putting a lot of faith in the U.S. market, which could really pay off if they make the right moves.
Yeah.
But investors, they should be watching closely how those acquisitions do and whether they can achieve those synergies they're hoping for.
Yeah. One thing that I was impressed by was their focus on sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
Like their commitment to using things like solar energy and zero liquid discharge systems, that shows they're thinking ahead.
Yeah, it's in line with what more and more customers want, brands that are eco-conscious. So all in all, it seems like IndoCount's a company worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah.
Their big moves, their investments, they could lead to some serious growth, but it's not a sure thing.
They're facing some real hurdles, but their long-term vision, it seems solid. The big question is, can they actually make it happen?
Yeah, only time will tell.
Now let's turn it over to you, our listener. What are your main takeaways from this deep dive? What really stood out to you?
Yeah, what surprised you the most?
And how would you use this information in your own investment decisions? These are all things we want you to think about as we wrap up this part of the deep dive. As we've been talking about IndoCount and how they're doing and their strategy, one thing that I noticed in the transcript was all those awards they mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
They got quite a few lately. Makes you wonder.
Yeah.
Is it just like, corporate bragging, or is there something more to it?
I think it's worth paying attention to for sure. I mean, these awards, they're recognizing things like, their sustainability efforts, their corporate social responsibility, even how they manage wastewater.
Yeah.
It's not just about making money for them.
Right. So maybe it's a way for them to kind of show what they value and how they're committed to doing business responsibly.
I think so. Investors are looking at these things more and more these days.
Mm-hmm.
Environmental, social governance, all that, ESG, highlighting these awards. It could be IndoCount's way of saying, hey, we're on board with those values.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's like they're saying, hey, we're not just about profits.
Right.
We care about doing things the right way.
Exactly. And that can really set you apart in today's market. I mean, customers want to support brands that they see as ethical and sustainable.
Right. It's almost like, a halo effect.
Yeah.
Those awards, they add like a layer of credibility and trust to their brand.
Definitely.
But let's get back to our main goal here. What are the key takeaways for investors? We've covered a lot, but is there anything else that really jumps out at you from this earnings call?
One thing that I thought was interesting was how much they talked about India's growing role in the global textile industry.
Yeah.
They seem really optimistic about the country's potential.
Yeah, they talked about that China plus one strategy and how India's becoming like the go-to place for manufacturing.
Right.
That's a big trend that investors need to be aware of.
For sure. And IndoCount seems like they're in a great spot to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
They've got the infrastructure, the know-how, and now with those U.S. acquisitions, a foothold in a key market.
And they're talking about expanding into new areas like fashion bedding and institutional sales that could really help them spread out their risk and keep growing.
Yeah, it adds a whole other dimension to their growth story.
So after looking at all of this, what's the final word on IndoCount?
Well, like we always say, we're not giving financial advice here.
Right. Of course not.
But we can say that IndoCount is a company that's changing. They're making some bold moves to set themselves up for growth in the future.
They're taking risks, but they're also showing ambition and a willingness to adapt to how the world is changing.
Yeah, their success is going to come down to whether they can make their strategy work, handle the challenges that come up, and ultimately deliver on what they're promising.
It's a story that's still being written.
Definitely.
So for you, our listener, the bottom line is this IndoCount,